Okay, so today we have this crazy story that is about some guys who like to sit around and poke holes in things that they believe are dumb. Have you ever had friends like that? Because I did. I know when I was in middle school, we called it junior high back then, there was the people that I ate lunch with included like this group of girls who were all church kids. We sang in like a quartet we like made up on our own, and we sang in church and at the nursing home. And we had locker loots. Did anyone, was this a particularly Fargo thing? Or there was a store called the County Seat that sold Levi's, and they had these things that were like for a couple years like a hot commodity, like, and they were called locker loots, and they were like tiny little duffel bags, and they came with like the stuff you might put in a thing like that, like your pencil case and your Kleenex and whatever in it, and they came in different colors. So, you know, the cool kids who do stuff like this would buy like all the colors, but I had one when it went on sale. That's how my life worked. All of our locker loots had I Heart Jesus pins on them. And then there was this group of boys that sat across from us, and they were all atheists, and they were all super intelligent. Actually, every person at this lunch table would go on eventually to be like in the top 10% of my class, except for me. But those boys were all like, the things that marked them were super intelligent, Van Halen fans, and atheists. And so here we were, and I think it happened because one of them was dating another one, and so this group of people came together. And some of them I'm still connected with now, so both the girls and the boys. I might have even seen all of them in my adult life. Anyway, we hung out every lunchtime, and we would talk about normal things for junior high kids to talk about, like what the best song to kiss to is. And these boys really liked Van Halen. We did not agree about God or the songs. So when I read about these Sadducees, I'm reminded of these conversations because these boys were like always trying to present us with these logical arguments about why God didn't exist, and our faith wasn't based on logic, and so the conversation never went anywhere. But that's what we did every day at lunch. The Sadducees aren't quite like that. It's just that I'm reminded of those conversations because of how the arguments sounded. Here's who they are. I'll tell you a little bit about them. You hear about two groups of people in the Bible, right? You hear about the Sadducees and the Pharisees. And the Sadducees were the party of high priests, aristocratic families, and like the merchant class, the wealthier of the population. And they tended to have good relationships with the Roman rule of the time of Palestine, and generally represented a conservative view within Judaism. And the Pharisees were a little different in that they claimed the authority of piety and learning. The Sadducees claimed that birth and social and economic position were what kept you in that higher class. And they were the protectors of the temple. And actually, when the temple was destroyed, that's basically when the class of Sadducees went away. So in this story, they're asking Jesus a question about resurrected life. And they pose this question, this ridiculous question, about this woman who, hypothetically say there's a woman whose husband dies before she has a son, and then she marries the brother and doesn't have a son before he dies, and this goes on through 7 men. So who is she going to be married to in this afterlife? And here's the thing to know about the Sadducees. It's in the second line that Linda read. They don't care about this question at all because they don't believe in the resurrection. That's like the primary thing about the Sadducees, is that it's not in the Torah, and so they don't believe in the resurrection. They're asking this question in order to try to prove how ridiculous it is to think about a resurrected life. So it's like a joke that exposes the absurdity, which is what these guys in junior high were always trying to do too. And so they're thinking about how could resurrection ever work in practical terms, given the complexities of human life, like what happens to marriage and to the lineage and family traditions, to Old Testament law, and like who's she hanging out with every night? Okay, so then the law. What is up with this ridiculous law, right, with the marriage? There's a so that is what the law says, is that if a woman is married to a man and doesn't have a son, and then the man dies, it is the law that the next brother would marry her. Why would you have a law like that? So they had this belief that it was, I guess this is still present in some places today, that, or maybe in some part of our psyche, that it's really important to pass down your legacy and lineage, to have the line that you follow. And if a man were to die before having impregnated someone with a son, and remember, the man, in their understanding of biology, was fully responsible for planting that seed, and then it got planted into ground that was either fertile or not, but the seed comes from the man, right? So, so if he dies before a son is born, then there's no way to pass down that lineage to them, and so his line dies, and that's very sad and horrible. And so the law says the brother will marry, and the brother will plant the seed, and then theoretically at some point a son is born, and that son is not the son of the brother, that son is the son of the one who has died. I know, right? And so they have this wild story about this happening 7 times, but no son being born, and so who's the husband in the afterlife? I'll say also about this law that it's primarily to protect the lineage of the man, but it also serves to protect the woman. Because in protecting, life is hard sometimes. Because when you have a woman who doesn't have a son, she also has no way to make money and needs some way to be protected. And in this society, that's the only way to have property or to make your own money. And so being married to the brother is part of what is going to protect her and keep her able to eat and live and not be destitute. Of course, they wouldn't need to protect women if they were equal under the law. Note that the question isn't really who is married to whom in the afterlife. It's who is her husband in the afterlife. This lets us know that it isn't really about marriage, it's more about property. So even if these guys were entertaining the idea of an afterlife, they are working on securing their status and property and place in the world through this question. We don't have the same problems on this level, but of course we do still wonder things about the afterlife. If a person marries twice because they are a widow, what does that look like? Or just the physics and biology of life after death, what does that look like? So I can't really blame them for their questions that are using this logic of their own time to try to understand this idea of a resurrected life. Remember last week, we spent time remembering the saints in our own lives. And we did so by living into this idea that Jesus gives us, this metaphor of God's house having many rooms, and Jesus goes to prepare a place for us. And we thought about what each of those rooms would look like. And that's maybe a little bit of different motivations, as we aren't all sitting on the power place like the Sadducees were, but the desire might be the same, which is to replicate the good things from this life in the next life and to keep it all the same, because that's what we know. And these are helpful images and metaphors for us when we are dealing with grief. I did end in saying that we don't really have any idea what heaven looks like, except that we are carrying, whatever it is that we are carrying is loosed in the bond with God. And this seems to be part of what Jesus' answer is, that they will be like angels, both those married and those given in marriage, is what Jesus says. Do you see where the possession of property comes in? Because women aren't married, they're given in marriage. Maybe what we can try to understand is that we are incapable of understanding what the afterlife is. But it's not like anything that we have experienced so far. That in fact, what is promised is not everlasting life, but that resurrected life is being caught up in the presence of God or with God. This might not feel like good news to everyone. Because if you have lost someone very close to you, and many have, and everyone will, then you may be comforted by knowing that you'll see and be with your loved one again, and will know them and recognize them. Every time you hear families talk at funerals, someone is saying something like, "She's with Gramps now." And what if that's true, but it's also true that all of them are also with all the people, with all the things that are love, which is God. In fact, last week, when Bev was listening to what all the rooms were about, she said, as a kind of aside as I was walking by, something like, maybe it's all those things and they're all flowing together in a river, which is very much like a U2 song called Walk On, that has this image, is my other view of what the afterlife might look like. My other example comes from this concert that I went to one time. Less about the words, but it has something to do with it. So it begins with this crazy speaking part that's a little awkward to perform. So I didn't ask it, because Bono goes, "And love is not the easy thing. The only thing you can bring is all that you can't leave behind." And then it talks about packing a suitcase that for a place that none of us have been, a place that has to be believed to be seen. And I know it aches and your heart it breaks and you can only take so much, but walk on. And at the end of this song, it starts talking about all the things you have to leave behind. And then from every direction in whatever dome you might have seen this concert in, you see these words that start from the very bottom and start moving their way up to the domed roof. And the words are, all that you fashion and all that you make and all that you build and all that you break and all that you measure, all that you steal, all that you feel and all that you reason and all that you care. And as it gets close to the top, the words are meeting so that at the top of that dome, it's just a bunch of letters that are all mixed together, all that you sense and all that you speak and all that you dress up, and all that you scheme, and all you create, and all that you wreck, and all that you hate. And then all these words are mingled in this chaos at the top, and the only words that are left that you can read are, you've got to leave it behind. But it's not, you don't have to leave it behind because it's how you get into heaven. It's because that's your baggage, and it's heavy, and you don't need it in this next place. And being in the presence of God also includes a letting go of all of the things that hold you to this place. I talked about this moment at this U2 concert in a sermon back in 2018. Johnny Law was there, and he reminded me that there are similar ideas in a Pink Floyd song, so I'd better name that too. Which also said, all that you touch and all that you see, all that you taste and all that you feel and all that you loved and all that you hate, all that you trust and all you save and all that you give and all that you deal and all that you buy, beg, borrow, or steal, all you create, all you destroy, all that you do and all that you say and all that you eat and everyone you meet and all that you slight and everyone you fight and all that is now and all that is gone and all that's to come and everything under the sun is in tune, but the sun is eclipsed by the moon. So all of those things eventually go into the dark. I want to tell you a little bit about a sacred moment in my life as I sat with Kate at the end of her life. I'll tell you that one time I heard Nadia Bolz-Weber say, if you can do anything in this life besides being a pastor, do it. But if you can't do anything else, you will find yourself with a ringside seat to the most sacred moments in people's lives. And I have found that to be true. And this is one of them. So Kate was 40 when she died 3 years ago. And I was with her on the last day of her life. She died of ovarian cancer, and it was a pretty long battle. And I had the privilege of meeting with her and praying with her. And her sister was there also. And there I learned about some of the things that she was leaving behind. There were some things that were really important to Kate, dramas in her life that had been going on that needed resolution. And while I was there, her sister would bring them up like they were probably things that Kate would want to tell me. Like, did you want to tell Holly about this thing? And it was clear that whatever it is that needed resolution was already resolved. Already something Kate had let go. It was like she was shedding the cares of this world as I watched. She would go, oh, yeah, well, he did this thing. Well, here's what I think I know and what I think I don't know. I think the things that hold us down here lose importance in the reality of God. I think I know that property doesn't exist in the realm of God. Our things or any people that you think are yours. The idea of property or of things being mine beyond this life just becomes absurd. And I think that our grief and our tools for grief are still important because we're still living here in this time and we don't have a very good idea of what comes next, especially we just know so little. And so I'll follow Jesus' example and still keep using the metaphors that Jesus uses to help us understand and deal with our grief and losses and our own fears about what comes next. I'll keep imagining that really big house with lots and lots of rooms where you can play football. But when that's no longer a helpful image for us, or when we can let go just a little, or when we need a different kind of hope, maybe we hear those words we read from last week's poem from Walt Whitman, that all goes onward and outward, and the smallest sprout shows there really is no death at all, and if there was, it led forward into life. And to die is different than any of us supposes, and luckier. Or Mary Oliver's ideas from the beginning of this week's poem, talking about trying for years and years just to learn to love your life, but then watching a caterpillar turn into a butterfly, and the butterfly's message was, don't learn to love your life too much, and vanished into the world. I still don't know what it looks like. We could probably do a year of different ideas about what this afterlife looks like. But I really like the idea of being caught up in God. Whatever that looks like, feels like, sounds like, to be caught up in the reality of God. So I'll end there.